We've had 18 years, the last 18 years. 9 of them have had Labour in government, 9 of them have had National in government, and there has been, poverty has increased, inequality has increased, and as we sit here tonight, neither Labour nor National has any policies to significantly reduce poverty or inequality. If I give you one example, the Labour policy on housing is to build 1,000 state houses a year when we have 41,000 people homeless. It's just not on. So I think that when the policy was launched, there was an immediate, the Green Party support went up in the polls, and I think a lot of us were really buoyed by that. We thought, wow, there's a change coming here in New Zealand. And the media then went on this rampage really personally against Meturia, to the point where they drove her out of the co-leadership of the Green Party. And we had far greater scandals that they've never taken up with the same gusto. Yes, the media's job is to ask the hard questions. Yes, the media's job is to put politicians on the spot. But it's not the media's job to tell us what to think and to run campaigns to get rid of politicians who are standing up for the poor and the dispossessed and the people who've been left behind in this society. Bill English did a rort, getting $900 extra a week. For how many years? Over $40,000. He was rorting the system. Did they go after him? Yes, they did. Did they drive him out of office? No, they didn't. Did they run a campaign where they hunted down his family? No, they didn't. There was a deliberate attempt to attack Meturia and the Greens, and I'm saying that not as a Green Party member at all. My wife is a member and supporter, but I'm not in that category. But I think those of us in the Christchurch Progressive Network were appalled at what happened, and we were desperate to make sure that poverty and inequality was at the front of this election campaign, not somewhere being pushed backwards. When Mike Hoskins asks the questions tonight, there won't be questions about poverty and inequality other than to acknowledge in a sense that neither National nor Labour have that at the front of their agenda. So without further ado, I want to ask you all to give a really very warm welcome to our guest tonight, Meturia Turei.
Taku kuru pauna mue, ti hei mauri ora. I te tūtahi ka mihi ki au ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohe, nai taku, ka te māmoi, te hai kounga, tēnā koutou katoa. Kei aku nui, kei aku rahi, e te ti, e te tā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight to talk about what I think is the single most important issue that our country faces. Thank you, John and the network, for organising this evening. And thank you all of those who are watching and listening on the interwebby thing. The social safety net in this country has been torn. It has been shredded. More and more of our people, our family, our loved ones, are falling through it. And we all see this. Everybody in this country sees this. We see it in the cold, damp homes. We see it in our schools with hungry kids. We see it in our hospitals with particularly older people and children sickening and sometimes dying from poverty-related illness. Over 200,000 children in this country still live in poverty, and it's just because their parents don't have enough money for the basics. The parents love their kids, they care for their kids, they want the best for their kids like any parent does, but they just don't have enough for the basics. And we know that child poverty costs this country billions of dollars a year in health costs, in education costs, in catch-up costs, in life course costs, in mental illness, in chronic lung infections, and in those deaths. Today's paper says 20 a year. I've heard doctors say 40 to 50 a year. Child deaths. We have to mend the broken safety net, and we have to deliver money to where it is needed the most and used the best, and that is into the hands of the poor, into the hands of the families who need it. Now, 6 weeks ago, I told you all my story, and I just can't say thank you enough to everyone who has shared your support and love to me. Thousands of you have talked to me, written to me, and said, first, thank you for sharing your story, and yes, it is my story too. Thousands of you. Thousands of you have told me your stories, and tonight, without any identifying features, I'm going to share some of those stories with you, so you can hear your own community reflected in this issue. Here's one. From someone from overseas. I do not feel like I can return to New Zealand. I feel the wages are too low, the opportunities too few, the cost of living too high, and not just house prices, but energy, food, water, everything costs more than it should and more than where I live. The greatest despair for me is that it seems as though New Zealanders have accepted this. It is the reality they must deal with. We have become isolated and individualised by 30 years of neoliberal messaging. It is not questioned in this country anymore. And I agree with him. The social safety net is being replaced by corporate and by community charity. It is not our right as citizens anymore to demand a social safety net. It is being, what is the word when you get contractors in? Yeah, it's being contracted out, that's right. And it reminds me of the Food in Schools program as an example of this. Now, I am immensely proud of the work that I did on the Food in Schools program as one of the political leaders, started in fact by Hone Harawira, who was amazing in promoting a Food in Schools program when he was in Parliament with the Mana Party. It was a campaign that stirred the hearts of thousands and thousands of people. There were mainstream media reports showing the extent to which New Zealand children go to school hungry and don't have lunch. And it led to a campaign of thousands of New Zealanders to try to solve that problem of hungry kids at school. Government funded corporates like Fonterra and Sanitarium, who were happy to give away their food, but also did note that it was a great marketing opportunity for them and building future customers. Other charities like Kids Can were also supported to do great work for these kids and their families so that they could have what they needed to learn at school. You had social enterprise initiatives like Eat My Lunch, which is a fantastic opportunity and shows a whole new business model, community model for engaging on issues like this. And then the communities themselves were really buoyed. They were doing community gardens, and local businesses were donating food, and parents were gathering every few days to be able to come in and cook with the kids, to be able to share the food. It was an incredible community response to hungry kids at school. And that means now that nearly 200,000 children are being fed at school by corporates, by charities, by business and by community. But they still go to school hungry. Their families don't have enough to keep them well fed. We did not fix the problem. Another story. I worked with a woman 22 weeks pregnant with twins, her third and fourth babies. She's on the job seekers benefit and she's still required to continue to prove that she's actively looking for work for the next month. She and her family moved in with her mum into a Housing New Zealand home that she grew up in so that she could have some support for looking after her two kids while she was pregnant. The State House had been in the family for over 20 years, but now all of the children had grown and were assumed to be independent. So the family was asked to leave, as the house is larger than the grandmother herself needs. The pregnant mum offered to put her name on the lease alongside her mother to save a massive upheaval for her family, because she too qualifies for a Housing New Zealand house. But they've all been told that they need to go back on the waiting list and they need to leave the home. Our welfare system punishes us for helping each other. The normal family relationships that we would all use at times of need, the kindness that we work so hard to nurture in our children, become threats against our loved ones if we must also rely on the social safety net at the same time. In the worst housing crisis in decades, we are not allowed to share our state houses with our homeless whānau. What have we become? A story. My marriage fell apart, and I stayed with my mother for two reasons. Either I lived with my 8-year-old mum and supported her, or I lived in my car. We were dobbed in to WINS for so-called benefit fraud, and my elderly mother had to visit WINS and explain the situation to them. She was fined, and we had to pay money back to WINS. An old lady having to confront this kind of challenge was very difficult for her and angered me, because by me helping to improve her state of health meant she did not have expensive hospital care. So we're not allowed to give gifts to each other because their monetary value can be classed by WINS as income and have their benefits reduced. Neither are we allowed to buy our whānau groceries or petrol vouchers without putting our loved ones at financial risk, because help like this is considered income by the state. We can't help to care for our sick family, or we risk being fined. We aren't allowed to show love or help or be kind to the people in our community who need it the most. What have we become? It was after the mother of all budgets. We were on the dole, and both took up casual work where we could. There were no stable or permanent jobs available. It was horrific to have the monthly declaration sheet come in, and we would call it the lie sheet, when we said we had no additional income to report. During that time, my strongest memory is that the whole time we were on the benefit, I had to save to buy socks for the children, If anyone needed medical care, it was a financial emergency, and there was a combination of guilt and desperation that there seemed no way to change the circumstances. And we know this. We know that families bounce between welfare and work and back again, that they're harassed while they're on a benefit to get a job, but then they end up in poorly paid and insecure work. And if for some reason they can't go back on the benefit, or they get a stand down if they lose their job, or are fired under the 90-day rule, they end up living in their cars. And sometimes they end up going to work every day from the back of their cars. Right now, if you are on a benefit, but you can work a few hours a week, the truth is you are financially punished for doing that work. It's just cruel. That's a trap. That's what a poverty trap looks like. Welfare law that incentivises dishonesty is bad law, and we must fix it. I was on the dole at 18 and getting casual work for delivering it for a furniture shop. My employer paid me cash. I told Wins I was working. Wins hunted down my employer, who said he wasn't employing me, and then I got the sack. I never told Wins about my casual work again. I didn't mind losing some of my dole because I was working. I did mind losing my job. Wins taught me to lie. When being driven into homelessness, into not eating so your kids can, into lying to Wins is the direct consequence of the rules and the law and the system, then that rule, that law, that system is being used as a weapon against the most poor, uses poverty as a weapon against the most poor. And we have to fix that. We have to stop that. It's not just being poor. There is a social stigma and humiliation that always comes with being on the dole. Kiwis are prideful, after all. We don't want to rely on others to support us, but shit happens. Circumstance and environments change and force us to have to do the walk of shame into the Wins office. It was people that got me out of poverty. It was community-minded people who believed in me, took a chance on me, not Wins. Intrusive, humiliating, denigrating. These have all been common words used to describe the process and the fear that you might do or say something wrong in Wins, to Wins, and have your benefit cut. And that leaves you even unable to ask for your rights, for your real entitlements. I worked for Wins a few years ago. I was often reprimanded by the team leaders when I let callers know what assistance they were entitled to. The prevailing culture was that if beneficiaries didn't know their entitlements, we weren't to let them know what was on offer. The punitive obligations on people receiving welfare benefits are extreme. It includes the sexist, the punitive Section 70A, which cuts women's benefits if they can't or won't name the father of the child. But it's a lot more than that. It's the often monthly demands to prove you're still sick, if you're getting supported living, or that you still have a disability. The piles of job application rejections that you have to use to prove that you're looking for work, having to get budget advice over and over again because your winter power bill is too high and you keep needing to go back for food grants. It's not budgeting, it's not having enough money. Where then is the reciprocal and the enforced obligation on Wins to make sure that people are getting their full entitlement? How are management held to account? How can people with compassion who love their community be supported in their work for wins when they aren't even encouraged to tell people what they are rightfully entitled to? The culture that has grown around welfare over the last 20, 30 years is one of penal welfare. And it is driving everyone, those who work there and love their people and want to do a great job, those who need help, has driven everyone into a state of terrible despair, and we wonder why there is such an increased need for mental health. We wonder why more and more people in this country are committing suicide. I have received a very large number of stories from parents who have talked about their children, adult children, who have committed suicide while on the benefit. And I have asked the minister, what are the numbers? Are you keeping records? And no, they don't keep records. They don't keep records. They don't want to see the reality of what penal welfare actually means for our people. I had 3 children on the DPB. The third was the result of a brief fling with a man on a sickness benefit who was living in his own flat. He had serious mental health issues and wasn't capable of looking after himself, let alone me and 3 kids. He used to come over most days to see the baby because he had nothing much to do and because he was the baby's father. Wins decided that we were in a relationship in the nature of marriage, and my benefit was cut. His, on the other hand, was not cut off, and neither did they move him to the married rate. I lost my flat and everything for me and my kids. Solo mums, and it's mostly women on the sole parent support, have been persecuted now for years for trying to keep healthy relationships with their children's fathers, for trying to find long-term and loving relationships, for just having sex with people. These women are forced to reveal the most intimate details of their lives, who she's sleeping with, how many times a week, under the threat of losing the money that she and her kids rely on to pay the rent. That is discrimination. It is persecution. Women must never be threatened by Wins simply because they are trying to form a loving relationship for her and for her kids' sake. I spent most of my life in a state of poverty, growing up in poverty and abuse. I never trusted in government or the law. I saw too much struggle to believe that they cared about the people. I realised not so long ago that it wasn't the government or the law that needed to change first. It was the people. Until the poor take interest, have a say, and vote in the masses that they are, nothing will change. For the first time since I was legally allowed to vote, I realised this. And so this year, my family and I will be voting. This is our great challenge. It's not enough that those of us who have the privilege of having gotten our head a bit above water, such that we can help whānau who are in this situation. There are actually too few of us to do this on our own. Our great challenge is to mobilise those that we work for, to mobilise those that we love. It is their country. It is their country too, and they have the right to have their voices heard and their stories told. Now, I told my story to force the country into this conversation. No working person in this country should struggle to pay the rent. No beneficiary should live below the poverty line. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with our welfare system and how we treat the families who depend on it. It drives people to violence against others and to themselves. It keeps children in filthy campground cabins until they sicken. It harasses families who are generous and supportive. It makes ordinary, good people suffer because they support each other to do the best they can to survive. I genuinely believe that we are a respectful country, that we value dignity and decency, and that we must hold ourselves and our leaders to a higher moral threshold below which we will not allow any person or any family to fall. A moral threshold below which we say no one should be that poor, no one should struggle that much. I was very frustrated by a number of things that have happened in the last 6 weeks. And I got too tired, I confess, to really defend against some of the accusations that were made in the last period. I'm going off script now. One of the things I regret most about not fighting back on was an interview I had on RNZ where it was suggested that I was not poor enough if I wasn't driven to prostitution as a 23-year-old. It was couched lightly, it was couched gently, but that was essentially the question. Is that our moral threshold for women in this country and men? That is the level, I've got no problem with people who are prostitutes and who go to that business. It's legal, it's, that's if it's genuinely a choice. But are we saying that people have to feel forced into that before they can justify getting any help? No, we don't. We don't. And I wish I had been strong enough at that point to fight back on that, because that is not okay. That is not the standard. It is not the standard that anyone in this country would agree to. So what have we become that even that question could be asked? We are better than this. We love our people and our country more than this. Sorry. Governments create poverty. Governments can end poverty. And we choose that government. In 3 weeks, we will choose which government we have. So we must mobilise. We need to mobilise not just to change the government, because different is not the same as better, but to create a government that will end poverty in Aotearoa. That is what we must do. And we create that government because we force this issue on them. We demand a response from them on this issue. What will they do? Not nice words. It's not just about measuring poverty. I've got a bill in the ballot to measure poverty too. It's important. It's useful. It is not the same as ending it. And if we do not have a government who puts ending poverty at its core, we will not. Because it is about the social safety net, about us as citizens demanding that our country, our people, be treated fairly with decency and respect. The same decency and respect that we would expect for ourselves, we would expect for every single person in this country. So let's mend the holes that have been torn open in our social safety net. Our kids will wake up in beds, not in the back of cars. They'll go to school with bellies that are full of breakfast and with lunch boxes that are full of lunch. They will spend their weekends playing sports or playing music and not in hospital dying from lung infections. This is the country we create. This is the country that we choose. This is our mission. This is our mission. Because a good government, a decent government, does not use the threat of poverty against the poor. Not now, not ever, and never again. Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm done. Thank you.
For some people in New Zealand, Willie Apiata is their idea of a hero. For me, it's people like Meturia Turei. Just getting a message here from Brodie. Brodie is the person running the live stream. Thank you, Brodie.
One from Facebook already.
It's a question from Facebook. Meturia, what about transgender homelessness? It's an issue of great importance to many LGBT community members, particularly given how it blights the lives of young whakawahine.
Kia ora for the question. There are particular communities, including LGBTI, transgender in particular, but also the disability community that are particularly impacted by both poverty and the ongoing effects of homelessness. And so the only way to deal with that is, one, we rebuild the state housing system in this country as a house for life, right? None of this housing for need rubbish. So we rebuild, we stop the sale off of houses, and we rebuild we require government to be a partner with community organisations, with iwi organisations, with councils, with private industry in some areas, to rebuild our housing stock as core infrastructure in Aotearoa. You cannot have a stable, secure society if you have extreme homelessness like we have now. And so we have to rebuild it as being core as electricity provision, as core as clean water provision, that housing is an absolutely essential function for a decent society. And that way, we improve access across the board. No more of this targeting, this kind of forcing people into such desperate need that the moral bar becomes so low. So I'm not being particularly articulate at the moment, but we push the moral bar so low around housing need. Like the story of this woman who's living in a house with her mother, with her 2 kids, 2 on the way, and they're going to have to move out and get back on the waiting list. It is completely insane that we have policy that does that. And the only way to fix that, and to make sure that people with particular discriminations get access to decent housing, is to rebuild our housing stock as housing for life, and with lots of different ways for people to access it, as a core commitment of government. The Greens believe that, Labour says they believe that. We can do it if we change the government. Kia ora.
Don't be shy. I don't know that I have a question. I share your dismay at what New Zealand has become, and I don't know when we became a country that decided to outsource compassion. That was it.
Yes, outsource
And that's what we're doing. I've recently moved from Auckland to Christchurch, so I'm one of the good guys that see the light. But I want to thank you because the courage that you've shown in the last 6 weeks is enormous. It hasn't been rewarded in some ways. I hope you don't come back through the back door. I hope you come storming through the front door because you represent everything that New Zealand can be. And I want to thank you for that.
Could you speak briefly about how people can support your Te Tautonga campaign? How we can get you elected? We want the Greens in power to bring the great policy, but we want you there. How can we make that happen?
So, as you know, it is the party vote that returns my caucus. I still feel like they're my caucus. That returns our amazing caucus back to Parliament. And it is absolutely essential that we have the strongest possible party vote to do that, because the only way we will make sure we get the transformation is if the Greens are in there in strength. And I want to be back. I want to go back, and I want to go back with a mandate. And I want, if you think I best represent you, then do, give me your electorate vote. But if you really care for the issues that I care about, then I'm asking you to give your party vote to the Greens. It is only the Greens who will make this happen. They will make that happen with me or without me, but they will make it happen.
That seems a little bit optimistic to me, mainly because I hear from a lot of Greens that the environment is the most important thing to them and not this social issue. But that's not my question. Are you going to frame your argument as a debate about human rights, or as a left-wing ideology?
I'll stress both points. So the three campaign issues for the Green Party at this election: end poverty in Aotearoa, clean up our rivers, and address climate change. They have been our core issues now for the 20 years we have been in Parliament. You would have heard Rod talk about those issues, Jeanette talk about those issues, Russell talk about those issues, now me, now James. They are still the core Green issues that we put forward at this election and at elections past. It is both of those things, actually, and more. It is a human rights issue, and there has been a strong push from some groups to make a claim that New Zealand is in breach of its United Nations, of its human rights obligations, because of both housing and our punitive welfare system. And I think that's a great start. I think that's a really good thing to be doing, because we do have, as citizens of this country, the right to housing and to a decent life, especially for our kids. And we don't have that guarantee built into the safety net anymore because it has been degraded so badly over the last 20 years. That's why in Auckland, homeless people are dying on the streets from cold. So yes, it is a human rights issue. It is also, I think, a left issue, to be frank, because we have seen in New Zealand that the right don't care. I've spent 15 years in Parliament, and I have tried every possible argument with those people. I've helped to deliver the evidence. I've done speeches about the deaths that policy causes to older people, to children. I've tried to work across party on various solutions. We've put up legislation. We have done everything we can with the right. And they refuse to accept responsibility for how their decisions hurt our people. So I want a left government with the Greens at its heart, because I think we can fix it. And we have to have that commitment to do it, and only we on the left will do that. That is why I was so happy with the MOU that I worked with Labour to change the government 18 months ago now, because I am absolutely certain that a change of government with the Greens at its heart and a strong force will transform and fix it. So I don't want to just lecture you again.
Kia ora. First thing I just want to say that I decided last night, it took me a while, that this time my party vote's going to vote Green, so I'm going to be a first-time Green voter. Thank you. And I also want to say how brave he's been and how pissed off I am at what's happened. But the point I want to make at Meturia is a really important one. The Army of the Poor was created by Ruth Richardson in the 1991 Mother of All budget to keep the rest of the low-paid workers of Aotearoa, remember 90% of whom are now worse off than they were at that time, 90% according to Max Rashmore, and the other 9 of the 99% are only a bit better off, only 1% are hugely better off. The rest of us are being kept in middle to low wage, miserable, near poverty, and we have to have that army of the poor at the bottom to keep us frightened in case we sink down there too, which also sets off the kind of oppositional behaviour that you've been the victim of. The Green Party is not my party of choice because it's not radical enough in saying we have to ditch the new right and we have to move towards a new social democracy where everybody is included. And I want the Greens to get together on this and to stand for the end of a new right. It's the only way for a fair society. So, you know, I think you do agree with me, but it's got to happen. It's got to actually happen. So, cheers.
Kia ora.
Everyone is talking about families and kids. For the last 7 years, I have been supporting a type 1 diabetic. I met him when he had just turned 18, he's now 25. He was living in a stuck home with his mum, and he wasn't getting a benefit at age 17. His mum was on a benefit, DPB, the rest of it. His mum didn't have enough money to pay for his diabetic meds. There was 4 kids in the family. His sister was a diabetic. He hadn't had meds for 2 weeks. What do you think he went in to get some money to buy his meds? He went and did some burglaries.
Yeah.
This is a 17-year-old let down by the state.
Yeah.
He's now 25. He's tried to find jobs to work. He's been on and off the benefit. When he was down here in Christchurch, by the way, he's now living in Hastings. He had to move. He went to live with his fiancée up in Hastings. When he was living in Christchurch here, his doctor, the background of that is he ripped the ligaments in his knee and he had to have an operation quick smart to get it. There was a waiting list about 6 months long. So he came to me, can you pay the part payment to get that operation? It cost, I think it was at the time, $1,000. I had to find it within a week. All his ligaments, no, 2 weeks it was, or the ligaments in his knee would be on repair. They were that bad. He was in bed recovering for 6 months. His doctor, by then he was 18, his doctor tried to get the supported living allowance, or the invalid as it was. By then National was in power, of course, and the unwritten rule had been passed: no one under 25, 30 will be put on the invalid's benefit. Nothing written in law, but that's what it was. He moved up to Hastings because he didn't get the support from Winds that he should have. His health has gone downhill. He's had heart problems, lung problems, blood pressure problems. His stomach got infected. He got what's called diabetic paresis, which is where your stomach doesn't digest your food properly. He got his stomach reduced in size and half his intestines cut out. His doctors in Hastings have tried to get him on the supported living allowance, but he flatly refused. He's been on and off the job seekers about 3 or 4 times. He's found jobs up in the fruit industry, one thing another up there. All the time I have been paying anywhere up to $1,000 a week for his meds, because most of his meds are not covered by farming. Not many people know. Back in 2014, Farmac had 90 drugs waiting in the list worth $200 million a year that National refused to fund. God knows what the list is now. His doctors in Hastings have tried 3 or 4 times since to get him on the supported living. He refused. So he finds a job. He lasts his job 2 or 3 weeks. He can't get enough money to pay for his meds to get ahead, because the disability allowance from Winds is only $62 a week maximum. And he's trying to buy $500 or $600 a week to pay for meds. And don't forget, if you're on the subsidy card, you have to have 21 prescriptions before any that on your list are subsidised get free. It's current at the moment, he's on about, asked him about 6 months, 9 months ago, how many meds are you on, the items you have to get each week? He said between 8 and 15 items. This is a 25-year-old. What is going to be done for people like him who will flatly refuse to put on the supported living allowance? Yeah. I had heard on Facebook, I'm on the John Key Let New Zealand Downstage, lots of people talking on there. I've heard through the grapevine to be even to get a sniff of being put on the supported living allowance. Nothing written in law that you have got to be incapable of working for 2 years.
Thank you. Kill that. Thank you for that. Because that is another part. Poverty is this massive driver of health and increasing poor health. Part of the social safety net is our health system, which too has been degraded, and it means that people, the poorest people, the people who actually, with some support early, could live well lives, are being stripped of that future because we will not give them what they need when they need it. And these are sick people. They don't need to be on job seeker. They need to be treated with respect and decency, and their health treated like it matters. And it does. It matters to you, it matters to me, it matters to us. And until we change the system, until we change the government, we change the system and make sure that that same social safety net, which includes health, is fixed, we will continue to have the poor suffer the most from the lack of support. So thank you for that story.
Just the other day, he went to Winds today. I got him to go see an advocate. And apparently they went to Wins today. He's got another meeting on Monday. And I said, how did you get on? He said, I might get the accommodation supplement.
Yeah, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Thank you.
1 year.
Hi.
Kilda.
Hi, thank you for speaking this evening. I just have a quick question. Do you know how much household debt contributes to poverty?
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
Is that something that you research or?
In terms of, do you mean household debt for beneficiaries in particular?
Well, like the people who are in poverty,
Part of it is for beneficiaries. The biggest the most of the debt that beneficiaries have as individuals or as families is debt to WINS. So it is debt for food grants, for power bills, for studying. It is debt. So WINS will give you your loan for a food grant or something like it, but then they will be taking $10-$20 a week out of your benefit. So the biggest debt that beneficiaries hold is to the agency that is supposed to be providing them with a decent income that keeps them so that they don't need to be getting into debt for food grants and for power bills. But we have this crazy system that forces them into that situation. It is what I would like to see and what the Greens have been talking about as tier 2 of our welfare reforms, because tier 1 was increasing benefits, fixing working for families, creating a children's credit to get rid of the discrimination in working for families and raising the minimum wage and getting rid of all of the punitive sanctions. That's tier 1. Tier 2 has to be getting rid of the debt, because we just can't have beneficiaries. I don't know what you mean by debt structure. Oh, so just in terms of one of the first announcements we made 6 weeks ago when I told my story was a set of policies that were costed around improving the immediate need. So improving the incomes, making sure that families who are on the lowest incomes were getting the non-discriminatory support, particularly if they had children, and getting rid of the punitive sanctions and the extreme obligations that beneficiaries face from WINS. Second tier includes improving access to the disability allowance and supported living for those who have disabilities, and making sure, one of the parts was also making sure we got rid of the debt that beneficiaries have to WINS.
So most people that are in poverty, are they mostly WINS?
Most of the people who are most of the debt that beneficiaries have is to WINS. It's not. They do still have debt to private agencies and that, but most of the debt they hold is to WINS.
Okay. So most of the people who are in poverty, are they WINS clients, or is this poverty and people?
So about
So people who are in poverty, are they their beneficiaries or?
The majority of people who live in poverty are on benefits because benefits are so low. 2 out of every 5 children who live in poverty are in families who work. So low wages is a major contributor to the poverty statistics, which is why the lie that work is the route out of poverty is so heinous and egregious. Why we need to actually deal with that lie, because it's just not true.
We've got 2 other.
Statistics on that
I can send you some stuff. Yeah, get hold of me or talk to Widamu and we can send you some stuff, because it's all there. It's all the best place to go for first instance would be the Children's Commissioner's report on the solutions to child poverty from a couple of years ago. The Children's Office of the Children's Commissioner.
Down the back.
All good. I should just want to acknowledge you, Janie Sage, who is here.
Yes.
You, Janie's one of the ones we're going to get back into Parliament in good, strong numbers to make the change. Yeah. Kia ora.
I'm interested to know how you change the mindset, I think the dominant mindset of your, a lot of voting New Zealanders who believe that people have chosen to be poor individuals can choose to then get out of it as well. And I think particularly that, I know we're often set up against each other, particularly like the working poor and versus beneficiaries and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, what's your suggestion? How can we change the mindset in 3 weeks' time?
It will be difficult to change the minds of people who've been living comfortably under that fallacy for so long. And remember, this is a 20, 30-year project that has shifted our country so far away from compassion. And we're not going to just do a complete flip in the minds of the community as a whole. So that's why I'm arguing we need to mobilise the poor themselves. We can't do it on our own. We have to actually work with our whānau that we work with every day to get them to the polling booth. I know the vote is one of the tools we have for transformative change, and because we are in such a dire situation with whānau, we can't afford to waste a single tool, and so that is why the vote is so important, given we've got the opportunity in a few weeks. The other one, the moral bar conversation that I have had with people with privilege has made a bit of an impact on them, because what we're asking them is not to necessarily care about other people, but which sounds weird, but asking them what is their own moral threshold, like as a person in this country, what are they prepared to tolerate and to see in their own community and in their own towns. And they may not know poor people, because actually that's what inequality does. Inequality divides people from each other and keeps us separate, so we don't see each other, so we can't notice what's going on with each other. But asking people to just think for a moment about what kind of society they're prepared to accept with the evidence that's in front of them, at least to get them thinking about their own responsibility. And I think for some who have privilege and who have resources and who haven't thought about that, it can have an impact. That's been my strategy so far. We'll see whether it works. Yeah, kia ora. Kia ora.
Someone at the front have a question? No?
Kia ora.
Good evening, ma'am.
Kia ora.
My name is Christopher Manu, and 25 years of age. I'm a Kiwi, university in Aotearoa. Recently enrolled to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, you.
Thanks. I'm still trying to get grips of all this political stuff, but yeah, lately, lately I've been coming across a lot of people in the streets, say these last couple of months, and I don't know about Auckland, but at night down here, it's because the weather goes down to say -6 degrees.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, at places like this, you know, why doesn't churches open their doors to the homeless, you know? I just saw briefly on the news, I don't really follow the news much, but I see
Me
it's a
either
problem.
much at the moment, yeah.
I see it's a problem in America as well,
Yeah.
with flooding, I think.
Mm.
But yeah, I'd like to know what your opinion is on that.
Kia ora. Okay, so two things. One is churches do and marae do open their doors, and that has been amazing to watch that happen in response to the homelessness crisis. There has been an incredible movement for that. And that's essential for dealing with the acute need of people right now today who have nowhere to stay and at real risk. But we just have to move away from thinking that the charity model and the corporate charity model is going to be the solution. I'm not suggesting you are saying that, but that is where we can end up. If somebody else is picking up the slack and making it easy for us not to see homeless people on the street, then what is our motivation for making the state do its damn job and take care of our people? So we have to keep we have to keep both. We have to both be committed now to taking the people who have needs right now, in whatever ways we can. But we have to keep the political pressure on, because if we don't change the system, it will continue on and get worse and worse. So I think we have to do both. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I sort of understand I guess that's something that we're working towards, but in the sense of meeting
now. Yep.
Whereas people in Upper Nooka, right, that are dying, that have been out on the streets. And who knows how many more people have to die?
Yes.
You know?
Yes, that is the question. How many more before we'll take it seriously?
It's just,
yeah. No, it's the right question. It's the right question to ask. Kia ora for that.
Thank you.
Okay. There's a couple of questions that have come in from line. What does Meturia think of the abolishing of the sickness benefit? If it still existed, I'd be on it.
Yeah.
But like many, I'm having to live on job seekers and supply a medical certificate every 12 weeks at great expense.
Yeah, no, it's completely ridiculous and needs to stop. So the shift of forcing people who are sick to have to prove that they're working and continually prove and spend money getting medical evidence that they're still sick is another weapon that you use against the poor to keep them more poor, to keep them unable to be effective, to trap them so that they can't find the means to get well and then find the means to be able to make a different path for their lives. It's a form of oppression. And so this is one of our core commitments is to simplify the benefit system much more carefully. But our first tier of changes that we announced, getting rid of the financial sanctions that punish poor people by taking their money away, and getting rid of the excessive obligations like that one and others, means that we create a system that is much easier for people to navigate. If you do not have work, then you should be getting a benefit. It shouldn't matter whether you live with other people. It shouldn't matter whether or not you're in a relationship with somebody. Actually, as a citizen of this country, you are entitled to decent support when you need it. And if we remove those judgments about need, whether you are the deserving poor or not, and whether you remove these kinds of obligations, oppressive, punitive obligations from people, then we have a system that treats people with respect and deals with their needs as they present them. If you are sick and you have no means of an income, then we have a social obligation to make sure that you're okay, that you can pay your rent and get your food and get your medication and get your treatment so that you can be as well as you can be. That is what we want. That's what we would want for our kids. It's what we would want for our parents. Why don't we want it for everybody else who needs it in this country? So yeah, we'd fix that.
There's another question here. What are your thoughts on solo mothers with young children under 5? And have SIFs continuing to target them since the mother's been under the state, but in the meantime things have changed and they've all the whānau and other supports they need from Alice?
So under National there has been an increase. They changed the law to make it much easier for the state to take babies, newborn babies, off mothers where they've been deemed by the state to be unfit. And we fought a huge number of cases and worked with others where the mother in particular had been working with Refuge or with other agencies to try to improve her life. And we're talking about people whose lives have been completely torn apart for all sorts of reasons that you can judge or not, but doesn't matter. They're still torn apart. And so piecing those lives back together, she needs a lot of help to do it, and it takes a lot of time. But she's getting that help and she's spending that time trying to rebuild her life, get the right support so she can have her babies with her. And yet the state still has the legislation that allows for those kids to be taken regardless of whether or not she's getting that help. And that has been one of Paula Bennett's most appalling legacies, that all things going well, in 3 weeks' time she'll be out on her ear. But There's been other changes. This legislation around SIFs has taken away the whānau first approach to the placement of children, so particularly for tamariki Māori. They're now at real risk of losing access and contact with their whānau and hapu now for good because of the way that the new law has been structured. We fought that too. So there has been, in my opinion, under National, a persistent persecution of women, and Māori women in particular. And we can stop it. We can stop it. With the law change, we can fix it. Yeah.
Look, we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll close up. Yep, one. Ooh, we've got 4 hands up. We'll grab those. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. Just got it.
Kia ora, thanks, Meturia. I'm Paul. The Universal Basic Income, UBI, obviously, has features that would alleviate a lot of the stuff you were talking about to do with WINS. We're told it's really complex and, maybe couldn't be implemented. And it seems it's a bit of a hobby project for a lot of people. Gareth Morgan's obviously pushing it. It's been implemented in some Scandinavian countries as a trial thing. So just 2 questions around it. Do you think it is an integral part of the solution? And if so, how do you think that a government with the Greens at the heart could go about moving towards that?
Thanks for the question. It could be in the future. We just have to be really careful. Gareth Morgan's version of it is a $200 a week payment. That's not enough for a family to live on. I mean, what happens then when you don't have, like, that is not a replacement to the welfare, to the social safety net, which says actually a decent life, it doesn't have to be a super fabulous kind of flash life, but a decent life where you can pay your rent, put food on the table for your kids, have a decent life, has to be essential. And so any social safety net has to provide that for people who aren't able to work and provide it for themselves. So that has to be the first priority. TOP does not have a poverty elimination policy. So it's not they're not going to do the job. A UBI could work, but it has to have a decent income as its fundament, and that takes a bit of thinking through in a country like ours. And so the Greens have said that we would look at how to implement a UBI once we're in Parliament and have got access to Treasury and all of the other kind of the expertise that we would need to develop it. But I think the welfare policy that we announced 6 weeks ago is essentially provides a basic minimum income for everyone, especially if we remove the married rate and individualise those benefits. So that means that every individual whose income is below a certain level is able to have a guaranteed basic minimum income that keeps them in a decent life for them and their kids. I think that's the first thing we should do.
Yeah, hi. So my question is, I guess, around the housing, and I guess because I've got family in Ihumātao, in Auckland. Kia ora, so up there in Auckland, the council, along with the corporates, between themselves, determined that they would take Māori land to build affordable housing. Yes. Yep. But that was a lie. So, kind of reminiscent, I guess, of land confiscation back in the early days. So how are we going to stop that from happening again in the future? Because that's an issue out there.
Yep.
And it's going to happen in other places. And the guilt's going to go on those people that they should give up their land for so-called affordable housing.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess not so much of a question, I'm just curious, will the Greens stop councils from making these laws again to suit themselves?
Thanks for the question. So we do not agree with the confiscation of Māori land under any circumstances, and we have fought that with the foreshore and seabed, and we will continue to fight that in all sorts of ways, including when it's been used, when housing need is being used as the kind of baton to force the confiscation. Totally down with that. The only way to properly build decent housing in this country where iwi and whānau Māori are involved is for it to be by consent. By agreement, by arrangement, by contract. This is a way that where government acts as a partner in the process and not as a kind of battering ram. or certainly not as a coloniser in the process. And I know there's big issues about that, but yeah, that's our approach. Kia ora.
A couple of hands back here. One here. Okay.
This one down here too. Down here. Kia ora.
Hi, my name's Stephen. I was going to ask about UBI and then the person just in front asked. I had a few more questions about that because it's not so much something that I think should be implemented even in the next few years, but something more for the future. Because as you said before, it's not about waiting for a last resort in terms of the benefit. And there's too many just part-time jobs available. And too many people are on part-time jobs because that's all that there is.
Yeah.
So that's where a UBI comes in to sort of supplement that. There have been a huge increase in productivity lately, but a very small increase in wages. This is another thing. I'm just wondering if the Greens have any more of a long-term plan in relation to a UBI, or is that more in the sort of precursor stages?
Talking about using our collective resources as a country to provide a minimum guaranteed income for people who are working part-time but can't earn enough to be able to provide a decent life for themselves and their kids, then that's in part what Working for Families was designed for. And the reason why we intend to fix it and get rid of the discriminations in it that mean that the most poor don't access the best support is because it can operate to do exactly that. So we do already have a system of transfers that enable people who are on low incomes, either because it's low pay or because it's part-time, to be able to have additional income support so that they can live a decent life. We just don't have it properly structured yet. So if that's what you're talking about a UBI doing, actually we already have the system that allows for that. It's just not working as well as it ought to, and we've said that we would fix it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, kia ora, thank you. Okay.
First off, thank you for your courage and integrity. It's really appreciated. But
thank you.
The question I wanted to ask, I was happy to hear your proposals, your ideas for the Green Party's plans for increasing benefits and making aspects easier to get. And you were talking about how WINS has a very punitive culture, and I understand that making the benefits easier to get would go a long way to alleviating that punitive culture. But what sort of policies would you or the Green Party generally support to prevent the kind of bullying that WINS workers have done of people in need?
Thank you. So I've known a lot of people who work in WINS. And I know that there are lots of people who work in WINS who really do care, that's why they're there, and but they have a system of rules and policies and culture led from the top that makes it impossible for them to do what they believe is right for their clients and for the people that they care about. So there's a few things. One, you change the rules. So for example, there is a huge number, thousands of investigations into sole mothers, solo parents, solo mothers, as to whether or not they're in a relationship in the nature of marriage, because the rules are so flexible that WINS can decide that you're living in a relationship in the nature of marriage, take you to court, charge you with fraud, and cut your benefit and make you repay. And we've seen examples of that. In recent times, there was a report about two older people. They were separated. They had been separated for a long time, but one of them had a stroke, and so they sold their separate houses because they still cared for each other, because that's what family is about. They sold their separate houses, bought one together so that one of them could look after the other. And although they shared the house in two different parts, they kept themselves financially separate, they didn't have a sexual relationship, WINS still said that they were in a marriage type relationship, and cut off their benefits and made them pay back money to them because they considered it to be that they weren't entitled. So we need to fix the rules. We say that a person who is on the sole parent support, for example, would only be required to give that up once they've got a job and they meet the income threshold, once they're married, if they're in a civil union, or if they are in a de facto relationship where the Property Relations Act applies, and so they're entitled to half the property, which is 3 years. And that's because, actually, we need a rule to stop. We need a rule about when someone is in a relationship in the nature of marriage, because without the rule, we are seeing women being persecuted, fined, having their benefits cut, being required to pay overpayments, being charged in the courts with fraud, sometimes going to prison, because WINS has this capacity to bully them to such a degree. And that is that's one of the most egregious examples, in my opinion, and has been one of the worst for a long time around the way that women are treated who are trying to form long-term relationships. But there are lots of other examples of the punitive obligations and the financial sanctions which operate in the same way. On top of that, we need to change the KPIs for WINS workers. When we have WINS workers saying that they are being required to not tell people about their entitlements, we need to fix that. So WINS workers, imagine if we were giving WINS workers bonuses because every single one of their clients was getting absolutely everything that they were entitled to and had a clear pathway about what they wanted to do next with their lives, and their kids were really well. I mean, that would be, as a WINS worker, that would be so affirming that you were doing a good job for the people that you were responsible for. That's what we should be building.
There were a couple of hands up the back there that or in the front? Yes, woman in the front here. Yeah. You two. You're the last two, okay?
Kia ora.
I'm a very big fan, and I'm kind of gutted that I can't vote for you this election, because you're kind of the only person I really feel like I align with that was in Parliament. But I was just wondering how you think that we can balance, or how you think the best way to balance the sort of immediate help and money that people need at the moment with the fact that sometimes it feels like that's subsidising things like the fact that house prices are so high and food is so expensive and electricity is so expensive.
No, that's a really good question. I will first say thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. And I would say too that I have spent the nearly 9 years of my co-leadership building and supporting a team of amazing women in particular who potentially will have my job at the end of next year. And that's because every leader needs to, I think the job of a leader, the first job is to find your successors, the people that you trust as a leader to take on your kaupapa and lead the organisation, take care of the people that you have for so long. So I would say I am incredibly proud of you, Janie and Mojo and Jan and Julie and Martima Davidson and the new ones who are coming in, because they do carry this kaupapa too. And whatever my future, I trust them to take this with them into their future too. So, and I think you can too. So the question is, sorry, I'm distracted, but the question is, like, how do you make sure, that we're not just end up subsidising like high rents by increasing the accommodation allowance just means that rents go up, and that's true. So that's why we have to treat this as a social safety net across the board. We have to deal with housing, health and income at the same time, because one of what we've seen over the last, what we saw with Labour in the previous government, and certainly with National, is that income is never talked about. Like, this is why I took such a risk to put poverty and incomes on the political agenda, because I know that housing is an issue for those other parties, that health is certainly an issue for those other parties, but they will never talk about incomes for the poor unless we force them to. So all of those things have to be seen as one, and for as long as incomes for the most poor are ignored, we will never fix all of the consequences for those other issues of of the social safety net, which includes health, education, housing, water, potable, drinkable, safe water, and incomes for the most poor. So, thank you.
That's our last question.
Tēnā koe whaia, ngā mahi nui, ngā mahi mahana nui āraha ki a koe. Ko te stokorongoa, ko Ngāti Hine Rau, ko Ngāti Kahu o ko iwi. Firstly, I'm voting for you, so thank you. We're all familiar with your courage and your sacrifice. I guess my question is kind of personal, and it's simply, do you regret it?
My name's Matt, I'm an ex-Aucklander, and I saw the light and came down to the heartland. In fact, I think my wife and I met you at the TPPA protest last year. We really support your welfare policy and your push with trying to acknowledge poverty. I haven't really got a question, I just want to acknowledge the appalling treatment that you've suffered as a result of going public about what happened with Wins 6 weeks ago. The longer it went on, the more disgusted I became, and I'd just like to apologise to you on behalf of decent New Zealanders.
Thank you.
I think we've got a real problem with our media. There's some serious issues there, and it shouldn't go on in a democratic country. And I agree with the Greens' public broadcasting policy, and I'm voting for the Greens, and I'm hoping that Labour will get the numbers and the Greens will be invited in. It's time it happened.
It's time.
Waited too long. Don't go away. You've got lots to offer, and don't let them push you around and push you out.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Okay.
Kia ora.
I've got a question, and I'm not sure how to put it out there, but it goes something like this. As a person I'm always juggling who I look at to run the country, and in some instances I haven't bothered because I'm not sure who's walking that fine line or who's walking that right line. But I've come to the conclusion that I see the world through cultural eyes, and I see the koru in most things. And I just wanted to put the question out there in terms of the Green Party, and under the Green Party, under the Treaty of Waitangi, my belief is that everyone should have a fundamental understanding of the Treaty of Waitangi, and in terms of the Green Party, the values that are contained within the Treaty of Waitangi, how are they represented in the Green Party? Okay.
So one of the first things I did as a member was to add a preamble to our charter. So our charter of our party, against which we judge everything we do and assess everything we say, says first, ecological wisdom. We take care of the resources of the planet because they are finite. Social justice, that in order that we do so for the benefit of all people and taking care of using those resources. Democracy, that the people who are most affected by a decision should be the ones making it, not on behalf of, but those affected make the decision. And peace, that there should be peace in our relationships with the natural world, and the relationships with each other, and between the state and its communities. So we added a preamble to that charter that took quite a bit of work, and I'm very proud of it, where we say we honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Māori version, the real version of the treaty. that we recognise Māori as tangata whenua and having a different status than in other people in this country as tangata tiriti. There are two, and we did that because we needed to put at the very fundament of our organisation and the way we operate and our policy and the way we organise that this is Māori land, this is a Māori country, and we are here, all of us are here at the largesse of whānau and hapu and iwi who suffered so badly for us to be able to build this little country called Aotearoa New Zealand, and that if we don't honour it in every opportunity, we are disgracing ourselves. And that means that, for example, that's what leads us to a policy of compulsory te reo in our schools, actually, to say that, finally. Because it's our language, and if we don't make sure that all of our kids have access to our language from this country, we are stealing their birthright from them. That's how that works for us. Yeah, kia ora.
Yeah, Kathy Sweet's going to come up. Kathy is running Meturia's campaign for Te Tai Tonga, and she's going to give a thank you and say a few words. Just before she does, does everybody here know about the hikoi that's on over the weekend? The hikoi? On your seats at the front of the room anyway, there's a little notice about it, but it's a really good initiative from the PSA. They're gathering in Ashburton tomorrow morning, and they're going to be walking in a series of walks to end up in Cathedral Square on Sunday, I think at 2:00. So it's an initiative which really deserves our support, so I'd sort of encourage you to think about that in the next day or so. But Kathy, welcome.
Ngā mihi koutou. Have I got sound?
Just keep talking.
Right. I have the pleasure of thanking Meturia on behalf of everyone here tonight. Can you hear me okay? Test. 1, 2. Ngā mihi koutou. I have the pleasure of thanking Meturia on behalf of everyone here tonight. And I know we're all here because of our values, our strong values about fairness and equality. And we've all got justice, as my grandma would say, in our bones. But we still need inspiration. We need incredibly inspiring people like Meturia. And we need to know there's someone who cares that genuinely in politics. And you've heard tonight that Meturia is our Green Party candidate for the Te Tai Tonga electorate. So the electorate covers the whole South Island and Wellington City. If you'd like to know more about how that works, that electorate, and how you can help with that campaign, please come and see our green team out in the foyer. So a huge thank you, Meturia. Thank you for your courageous and encouraging words and your courageous actions over the last 6 weeks. Kei te mihi au ki tō iwi, tō hapu, tō whānau, tēnā koe te wahine toa.